name's Eric Welander and welcome to Wendy Tech, a channel all about smart home tech in the Apple ecosystem. Today, wait a second now. Let's rewind that for a second. Welcome to Wendy Tech, a channel all about smart home tech in the Apple ecosystem. Notice how I didn't say HomeKit. Yes, Wendy Tech is not just about HomeKit, although HomeKit is a huge part of smart home tech in the Apple ecosystem. It's really at the center of it all, but it doesn't mean that everything always has to work with HomeKit. And today we're going to talk about an accessory, the Lutron Aurora Dimmer, which isn't technically compatible with HomeKit, but can give you some increased control of your Philips Hue lights that are compatible with HomeKit. So maybe you've gotten some Philips Hue bulbs and the bridge. It's a pretty great way to get started with smart home tech. If you haven't already, highly recommend getting some Philips Hue bulbs, whether you're renting or owning your place. It's a really straightforward and just friendly way to get going, and then you can trigger all these automations. But maybe not everyone you live with is quite so passionate about smart home automation. And you might have set up all these great things with Philips Hue lights, but then they just want to go over to the light switch and flip it on or off. And you have to leave the light switch on in order for things like Philips Hue and other smart bulbs to work, because they need that electricity to communicate with the rest of your smart home, and then they can turn the light on or off from the socket. So then if your family members or friends flip off the switch, you're out of luck. It's not responsive. All your automations go to waste. So you talk to them politely about not turning off the switch, or you could put tape over the switch to keep it from being turned off, or get these little plastic covers that they have for different types of switches on Amazon or other places, and cover the switch. But then you really just have a useless lump of plastic on your wall. And it turns out light switches are pretty handy. They've been around for a while and are important for really any home setup, whether it's smart or not. So that's where two companies we've talked a lot about on this channel, Lutron and Philips, with their Hue lighting program, have come together and partnered to make the Lutron Aurora Dimmer. Now, this is a great little rotary dimmer that goes on top of a traditional light switch, but so then it keeps that light on, but then also allows you to control Philips Hue bulbs that are nearby. So it's really meant to work with Philips Hue, but I wouldn't be shocked if some of you whiz kids out there could figure out a way to get it to work with other kinds of Zigbee light bulbs, but just count on it just being really for Philips Hue. Now, it's important to note that this is not compatible with Lutron's Cassetta wireless system, which are those nice smart switches. You can replace the switch in your wall with a smart switch. That's totally different. The idea here is, whether it's because you're renting or you just don't want to get into replacing the switch, this goes over top of the existing switch. So before you run to the link in the description to Amazon or your local store to get one of these switches, there are a few things that you should consider. First is that it only works with traditional light switches, those that are like, have the little thing that pokes out. Paddle switches or other kinds of more modern looking switches don't work here, so this is not going to be an option for you there. The other thing to point out is, think about where you want to put this in your home. If there's a place where you have more than one light switch controlling the same set of lights and you want those to be Hue bulbs, you'll need to somehow block using all of those switches, because you'll need all of them to be on. You don't want, one to have the Aurora Dimmer, but then someone can just go over to the other switch that controls those lights in your home or apartment and flip that off, and then it still turns off the lights. So it needs, but you can get multiple ones of these Aurora Dimmers and put them on all of the related light switches. So keep that in mind as you're thinking what works with your setup. Also, if you have a switch plate that isn't white, this is pretty much a pure white accessory, and so far Lutron doesn't make beige or different colored versions of this control. So you might want to run out to your local hardware store and get a white switch plate and that's easy to swap out without having to swap out the actual light switch, and then you'll get something that looks more cohesive. If that's something you care about, having, you know, different shades of white or something combined might not look the best. The other thing you'll need is a small Phillips head screwdriver, kind of like the ones you would use to repair electronics. So just have that at the ready when you get this accessory to install it. Otherwise, you won't get very far. This is one of the easiest pieces of smart home tech I think I've ever installed. You really just remove the packaging, and then there's two parts of it, and you put the plate over the switch and then tighten the screw. And basically this metal piece in it goes up and pushes into the light switch a little bit, and then that's what gives it this grip. Then you just line up this open part of the round dimmer part and then just place it on the switch, and you're good to go. It's installed. Now, from there, you just have to add the accessory in the Philips Hue app so that it can talk to your light. Now, keep in mind, go find the Friends of Hue section in the accessory setup, and that's where you'll be able to set up this switch, because it's not technically made by Philips, it's just officially a partnership with Lutron. Now, you then add it to a room in the Philips Hue app. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that it seems, at least right now with the configuration of the app, this dimmer automatically and always controls all of the lights that you have in that room. Now, before you panic or realize that that's not going to work with your setup, keep in mind that the Philips Hue app can, even though it doesn't really like it, but it's very possible, and I have this set up, where the rooms in your Philips Hue app are different than what's in HomeKit or you know, other smart home platforms that you might use, like Amazon's or Google Assistant. Those don't always have to match Philips Hue's rooms. So you could just put the lights that you want this to control in its own little room. Just keep that in mind, that you might have that extra complication on setup if you're really keen on this only controlling certain Philips Hue bulbs in a particular room. So now that you have it set up, what is this switch like to use? So far, I'm not blown away by the speed. Oftentimes, if you use a real dimmer, you see a lot more instant reaction between moving the dimmer and then seeing the light change brightness. Now, this dimmer, there's definitely a noticeable delay from turning the dimmer and then seeing the light change. Now, that said, it's not so bad that it's not usable. It's totally usable and not a big problem, but if that is something that bothers you, you'll definitely notice it with this accessory. And that lag really feels more akin to using, say, the Home app on your phone to adjust the dim brightness of a light switch. You'll notice that as you turn the dial in the app, there's a little delay between then seeing the light change. It's a very similar kind of delay to you turn this knob on the wall and then you see the light change brightness. So as far as where you can install this, I did test switches that are sideways and switches that need to be stuck in the down position. Both work just fine. You just have to line the plate up properly. You know, instead of putting it vertical, you put it to the side or upside down, but otherwise it works great. There's no noticeable difference in how you use the actual switch. Also, keep in mind that it doesn't need to be on the actual switch of the light is controlling. If you have some other way to block those switches, you could put this in a more convenient switch location, but it does need to be on one of those traditional light switches. There's not really a lot of other flexibility of where you could put it. That said, though, it works just fine outside of a light switch. It doesn't need anything from the light switch to technically adjust your lights. As far as battery life, Lutron rates the CR2032 battery inside of it at 3 years. To replace it, you just pull off the main circle part and then undo one screw and you're at the battery to change it out. Now, the last thing to note is because this is so easy to install, and in certain configurations it doesn't technically need a Philips Hue hub to function, I could even see this being a smart home tech thing for, you know, digital nomads or people who travel a lot. If you're able to go to places that you know have the, you know, traditional style light switches and you want some smart lighting, you know, you could screw in a couple of smart bulbs from Hue, put this on the wall, and you have a smart lighting setup right away. I didn't do a ton of research into all the details of what's needed to make all that work, but it is something that the companies say is possible. So if it's something that's interesting to you, let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you find. So, is this the best switch for your setup? Now, if you're into the Philips Hue ecosystem, they also sell some dimmer switches that are really just a set of 4 buttons, and you can mount those to your wall or you don't have to. And those are compatible with HomeKit, where you can take those into HomeKit and customize what each of those buttons does. And I've made a video all about how to do that and what you can do with that through HomeKit. It's really powerful. And this dimmer switch, at least currently, has none of those extra features because it just works with the Hue app. It doesn't also work directly with HomeKit. You could set up some automations where when you turn on one of these Philips Hue lights, you can do an accessory automation in HomeKit, which means when this Philips Hue bulb turns on, I also want these lights and this fan and this smart plug to turn on as well. And you can do that. It's not immediate, but it happens in like a second after the 2 things happen. Most of the time, given that the Philips Hue dimmer switch is cheaper and offers more features, I would go with that over the Aurora dimmer. Now, that said, if you have to cover your light switches and your light switches are in that central location in your home where you really want to have that functionality right there, instead of having to add a dimmer switch from Philips right next to it, you could just cover the existing switch with this Aurora control, and that looks really slick. For cost and features, I would go with the Philips Hue dimmer switch. For maybe aesthetics and looking like it was there all along, I would say you might want to look at this Aurora dimmer. Let me know down in the comments if you've used this or the Philips Hue dimmer switch. Are you keen on getting one or the other? Maybe use cases. It's great to discuss all those different scenarios with everybody in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.